What are some of the systemic issues people with disability face in Victoria?
Mainly the sectors around not getting support in education and needing to find a voice to help them get the education values they deserve and the rights they deserve. Well, at the moment in the education, they make it hard for you to fit in, especially with no funding to support for aids or getting the help you deserve to be in the mainstream classroom and getting pushed towards segregated education.
So we have parents with intellectual disability who are either about to give birth or have children. And there's a sense or an unconscious bias, I guess, in child protection that intellectual disability can present itself as a risk to the child. And so in a risk-averse environment, instead of identifying what supports these parents need in order to parent safely and successfully, the children are often taken into care. And often at a very early age, sometimes right from birth, where child protection will turn up at the hospital and take the child immediately into care. That's absolutely devastating for families, and it can make it almost impossible for a parent to be reunited with their child, particularly if they're a first-time parent, because they never get to develop the parenting skills that other parents do effectively by learning in the job.
One of the issues that we see a lot with housing is that there just isn't enough housing stock provided in Victoria for people with disability who require access. There's just not enough. There's not enough social housing. There's not enough community housing, and I think there's a misunderstanding from providers and from government about what's needed in that space. So the other area would be in public transport. It's something like 5% of the network in Victoria and in Melbourne particularly is actually accessible for people with disability. And so if you consider the importance of transport, just in terms of how that sets you up for the rest of your life, if you can't get to an opportunity, people don't get to go.
We see lots of people with disabilities who are involved with the criminal justice system as either alleged perpetrators or as victims of crime who come to us for help because getting access to legal aid is really problematic, and then working your way through and around and understanding the criminal justice system is really difficult as well. So we see lots of people who have disabilities who are involved with the criminal justice system in ways that they don't really understand and aren't in a good position to help themselves, because the system is kind of designed to catch people out, and people with disabilities often are very open and upfront with what's going on, and so often aren't great at understanding what's happening and defending themselves, and so we see lots of people who are struggling with that system.
We see, disability discrimination in the LGBTIQA+ space, and then we see LGBTIQA+ discrimination, like homophobia and transphobia, occurring in disability settings. So from our perspective as an organisation, it's really important that we can come together and have a voice so that we can prevent some of that from happening in both of those spaces and in the community more broadly. In the health system, we see some issues where LGBTIQA+ people feel that they have to stay in the closet in order to receive adequate health care. And we find that when there are those multiple barriers involved, if you're already having to deal with maybe some discrimination or discomfort in terms of your disability within that system, by coming out and expressing your gender or your sexuality, you may feel like, or you may be discriminated against further, and you might not receive that kind of care. So we find that within systems, it's really challenging when you have more than one marginalisation. We find that people are experiencing that that second layer of discrimination. A lot of it, I think, stems from the issue that a lot of people with disability are essentially infantilised, and that one form of ableism is that people with disability aren't seen as full adults, even when they're maybe well into their adulthood. And so a part of that is that they're not having their sexuality or their gender recognised. It's assumed that they'll be straight, it's assumed that they'll be cisgender, for example. And so people aren't able to express themselves and aren't able to be their full selves within those service systems.
For more information on disability advocacy, visit www.daru.org.au.